Hang on, I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Just a moment. Okay, I'm just going to put myself in presentation mode. So hi, I'm Stephanie Chabot. I run a small business called The Finance Diaries. And at The Finance Diaries, the entire purpose of what I do is to help people understand finances better, because not everything's super clear. Sometimes things get a little too technical and we need to take a step back. So today specifically, I'm going to be talking to you about relationships and how they have to do with finances. It's often a really difficult situation to go through, especially when we grow up in households that don't feel very comfortable talking about money. So I'm going to talk to you about how to do this from A to Z. So the agenda for today is to start talking about goal planning, the different money management methods that exist, and then how to track and fix things as time goes on. So I just spoke a bit about this. I don't know if my own face is in the screen. Sorry, just a second. And then what I do is personal coaching, and I also just do general education. So you can find me on Instagram. I also have a podcast, all kinds of different things. So when we think of relationships and finances, I know that we can't always say that correlation is causation, but there's a study that showed that 41% of divorcees from Generation X and 29% of baby boomers say that their divorce was due to some sort of money disagreement. And money issues and problems with discussing money were found to be a primary indicator of a future divorce in a study by the Family Relationships Journal. So again, we can't say correlation is causation, but if it's just one less obstacle that we can remove from our potential situations down the road, and it's something that's very much important to talk about. So discussing finances in a relationship is a very healthy way to avoid situations later down the line. And worst case, you've discussed finances and it didn't even end up doing anything to your relationship. So there are a few different ways that we can talk about finances to start with. Because for most people, I've coached some different individuals that they have only been dating a few months and they want to have money conversations, or sometimes they've been dating for 5 years and they don't even know the other person's salary, which to me is absolutely crazy. But I also need to recognize that not everyone's going to bring up salary like on date number one. That would be a bit crazy. So it does obviously feel unnatural and awkward, but it's like riding a bike. At the beginning, you start riding a bicycle, you might fumble or just make mistakes, but then the more and more you do it, the more and more comfortable you get. And there's so much benefit to discussing finances because you can work on your mutual goals together, you can accomplish things, you can work really as a team, and there's just unlimited benefits to that. So there are 3 important things that we need to consider. We need to consider a mood, the mood that we're in. Maybe not best to start discussing finances if you're in the middle of an argument about something. Maybe in terms of timing, not best to bring it up just as you're going to bed, or maybe not the first words that you say to your partner or partners in the morning. And then how much do you want to dive into it? So maybe a little bit difficult to start out with a full-fledged financial breakdown, but how do we just start those conversations flowing so that we can increase the degree of difficulty of these conversations? So I've broken it down in terms of a couple examples of what you could say. So really easy, first thing that we could say is to just ask someone's opinion, one of our partners' opinions on what we think would be a good idea. So let's say I'm thinking about when I was buying my podcast microphone, I was asking my partner if he felt that it would be good for me to just fully invest in a great microphone right off the bat, or if I thought that I should just get something less expensive and then figure out how much I like podcasting. So it's not that much of a financial conversation. It's not about our finances in a relationship, but it was more about spending money on something and having that first little go at it. A little bit more difficult would be to talk about something like RRSPs. So if you're talking about how to have your employer match your RRSP contributions and it's something you're unfamiliar with, or something like that, like about contributing to a TFSA, what kind of ETF that you might want to invest in, something like that. And then getting a little bit harder. So one of the harder ones is to start talking about mutual goals. So mutual goals that I've heard about doesn't mean that you have to do this in your relationship, but sometimes it comes to buying a property. So buying a house, a condo, whatever it is. And to start bringing up those plans, say, hey, we do want to buy a house and we didn't really talk about when or how much we need to save. So let's have that discussion. And then probably the most difficult one, and I would call it expert mode, is when you know that you've had really no conversations about money, but you want to dive straight in. I'm this person that I'll probably overwhelm people most of the time with my discussion with finances, but that's because I like to go all in. And obviously with all of these different things, you need to gauge how comfortable you are and how comfortable your partner or partners are going to be and how receptive they're going to be to the conversation. Maybe you're in expert mode, but you know that they definitely need to start with something small and work their way up. You know your partner or partners better than I do. So you would be able to decide what is the best way to approach this initial conversation. I talked about goal planning a bit in the previous slide, and I think that that's something that's really important when we have a relationship, is that we're usually working towards some sort of common goal. It's extremely helpful. I don't know if you've ever tried to do something entirely on your own from start to finish, but it's not the easiest thing. And the whole point of a partnership is that, I mean, to me at least, is that we do have the ability to lean on each other and to help each other out where we might have some gaps in what we're able to do. So if you are working towards something together, it helps keep you motivated. You can keep each other informed on the progress. You can even bounce off of other couples that you know, what they're doing, mistakes that they've made, things that they could, like lessons learned, or anything that you want to share. So it really is helpful to do this goal planning together so that you're exactly aligned, working towards the same thing, and not kind of, I don't know if you've ever been to an escape room, but this happens a lot, is that people go to an escape room and they'll all be doing their own thing in the escape room. And like basically the point is that you're trying to solve a puzzle of some sort. But if you're all trying to do the same thing without communicating to each other, you're definitely going to fumble a lot. You're not going to get to the end of it as fast as you would want. And I mean, this is in a time situation, but why wouldn't you want to reach your goals faster? So it's very helpful to talk about it together. So in terms of goals, there are three main ways that I like to break them down. There's immediate term, which is something that you could pretty much set out and do right now. This would be anything that's less than 3 months. So maybe there's a bit of prep work required, but it's not like saving $50,000 or something. Short term would be anything from 3 months to 1 year. And then long term would be anything beyond that. What I like to say when it comes to goals is that you need to have your goal list, but you also will have some common goals. So what you will do when you do these kinds of exercises is that you would write down every goal that you have, and your partners would write down all of their goals. And at the end, you would discuss it. So you can see, well, are you trying to buy a house? Are we trying to buy a house in a year? Or are we trying to buy a house in 2 years? When are we trying to start having children? So it doesn't just have to be financial goals, but all these different things, it pretty much does come back to finances, because there's a pretty important financial factor in having kids as well. So it's important to have these discussions, because maybe you're not even going to be aligned on a lot of things. And you do need to kind of circle back to what it is that you want to accomplish in your partnership. And then in terms of how you want to do it, what I say to do next is that for each one of your goals, whether they're your individual or couples goals, is that you want to talk about what you've done to get this goal accomplished and what you still have left to do. So it makes it a pretty long exercise, but it's important to do this because sometimes we say, okay, I want to buy a house in the next year. I'm just taking that because it's a pretty common example. But if you haven't saved any money for a down payment, you haven't gotten a pre-approved mortgage, you haven't started to discuss with a real estate broker, all these different things, well, you might be missing quite a few elements to actually get that accomplished on time. So it's important to know what we've done and what we still need to do so we can realign exactly what time length that we want to have associated to that goal. And it's important, as I wrote at the bottom, is to do this a few times a year, because if you only do this once a year, you might be missing all the progress on your immediate term goals and kind of missing the follow-up on if something needs to be changed. Because we have this thing as humans that we tie ourselves to a goal or to a dream and we feel like we can't change it. If you decided that you just, I don't know, let's say you found out you were pregnant and you realize that your goal of buying a home might have to get a bit delayed because you have to reshuffle some of your budget around. And it's important to update your goals and your timelines accordingly because these things happen. I mean, not necessarily that exact situation, but things that change our goal timelines happen. And it's completely fine to decide something is no longer a goal. It's completely fine to change the timeline on a goal. And it's completely fine to add new goals. Maybe you'll accomplish something quicker than you thought, or you can achieve more than you thought, and you want to add more to the list. When I make my goal lists with people that I coach, I find that what comes up a lot too is that people were told to have certain goals. So I brought up having children and buying a home, but those might not be goals for you. So it's very important when you do this exercise that you actually genuinely write down things that you desire to accomplish and not just something that someone else told you to do. There's the classic, well, I'm Jewish, so my mom believes that everyone should be a doctor. She obviously encouraged any of my dreams, but being a doctor was not on my goal list. And I had to scratch that one off because I was like, no, that's mom's goal. That's not mine. So remember to really focus down on what it is that you and your partner truly want to accomplish, both individually and as a couple. There are a few considerations, like I mentioned before, about what you want to do in terms of your finances together. So it's very important to discuss. We talked a few slides earlier about conversation starters and things that are important to get the ball rolling. But whatever your best friend is doing, or your sister is doing, or your uncle's doing, or whoever is doing, doesn't mean that it's going to be the right thing for you and your partner or partners. It's very important to discuss it and to have these open discussions so that we can decide what works best for our relationship, because it's our own individual relationship and you will decide what makes you happy. There's also spending habits that we need to consider when it comes to money management, because one partner might be spending significantly more than the other one. Maybe one of the partners is self-employed, so there's a lot of expenses related to employment. There's all kinds of different factors that we need to consider that makes our situation individual compared to someone else's. Discussing and spending is also ties into fairness. What happens at the end of our discussions is that both people, or all the people that are involved in the relationship, should be happy and feel like the situation is fair. When it comes to talking about goals or how we spend money or whatever it is, if one person is unhappy, that's what kind of goes back to what I discussed at the beginning, saying that it is a contributor towards divorce or separation, is that people will feel like there's some sort of unfairness. And unfairness can stem in tons of different ways. It can be that you feel it's unfair how much one person is spending, or it could be unfair the way that things are split, whatever it is that could lead to these kinds of problems and resentment. And it's really important to have trust. I know that this comes up probably in everything that you've ever read about relationships, but also at the same time, trust with money is very important. If you're going to have a shared credit card or a shared bank account and all these different things, it is important to have this trust. There's something that I didn't specifically mention in this presentation. I think that it gets to be a little bit, again, of there's no one size fits all, but about prenuptial agreements, and that would fall under the brand of trust. But I know that it's not necessarily relevant because we're not talking about marriage and relationships, but I will have that as an extra side note, is something that you should be discussing with your partner if marriage becomes something on the table. So these are the three most popular money management methods in relationships. And then again, like I said before, there's no right answer. It really depends on your individual partnership, because for some people, the one pot method, which is where everyone shares a single bank account, you pay all the bills out of that, you do your shopping, whatever it is out of that. For some people, this method is preposterous, because maybe you spend a lot more than the other person, you make a lot more than the other person, whatever it is that could contribute towards that not being the best method, it depends on you. For people that are relatively the same income level, spending relatively the same amount, this could be a great option. But again, it's not for everyone. It's the same way that splitting costs doesn't always work for everyone, because you kind of lose track of what's going on. So this one, I've heard of most people doing the splitting cost method. So like I pay the rent and you pay the groceries and the car payment or something like that. So maybe not necessarily using like something like Splitwise. I mean, you could also do that and split all the costs evenly, but that way that there's relative amount of splitting things. And it's also easy to manage, because you keep your own bank account, like you have your own finances separately and you just make sure to pay the bills. Again, this one could be problematic because if someone loses their job or something like that, or changes jobs or whatever it is, and something doesn't get paid or someone forgets something, then it could be a bit more complicated, but you can fix that issue with automatic payments as well. Proportional one is one that is not necessarily the easiest thing to manage if you're both working. So sometimes what happens that the proportional method is like, let's say, for example, there's a partner that's working maybe part-time and taking care of children or aging parents or whatever it is. And then the other partner is making significantly more. So they are contributing more towards the household. So this one is, it definitely needs to be discussed more, because you need to adjust frequently. Like maybe if you're going to go back to work, or you're changing, like let's say you're changing living situations because someone maybe went back to school. There's so many different ways that we can consider proportional finances. And this one takes a lot more reiterations and looking into it more, but that could also work very well for some people. So there are drawbacks and there are pros to each one of these methods. And again, like I am just going to slide back to the other slide to show you that there truly is no one size fits all. Whatever it is that works best for you. If you want to have even a hybrid of some of these, sometimes what will happen is that there will be some sort of secondary bank account that you take all the money out of. So you have your own income, and then maybe you make an automatic contribution to this community bank account that then you pay all the bills out of. There are so many different interpretations. And again, it's exactly how you want it to be. It's just important to start the discussion as early as possible, because if you wait really, really long, the conversations are much harder to have. Like if you waited, like some of the people that I've coached for 5 years, it's hard to get the ball rolling on that. So in the last phase of what we need to do is that we need to look into tracking things. It sounds kind of like a weird word, I guess, to use tracking, but it's important to do this to monitor how we're doing with our finances, how we're working towards our goals, and then how we're accomplishing all that along the way. One of the first things that is important when we bring up these money conversations moving forward is to make sure to take, I know this sounds crazy because it's a relationship, but to take out as much as the emotions out of the situation as we can. Because most of what we know about finances is influenced strongly by our upbringing, through our family, our culture. Sometimes we have unresolved money issues that we don't even realize that we necessarily have, and it can make us super, super emotional. And having these discussions when we're feeling this like pain or whatever influence that we have that we're very set on. We always have to remember that we didn't grow up in the exact same situation as our partner. We didn't get exposed to all of the same things as they did, and to just try to take that step back and look at it more as a big picture. So to say at the end of the day, look, I know I have this and you have this, but we are working towards something together. And it's important that we put aside all of our emotions and we talk about this rationally. It's important to do this because you are a team and you are trying to be working towards the same thing at the end of the day. Meetings, this sounds really silly because you're not a company, but meetings can be really fun. So when you discuss finances, maybe you don't want to sit down at the kitchen table and like stare into each other's eyes while someone runs through a spreadsheet. It's not really that fun, but you can make it fun. You can put on music, make your favorite food while you're doing it, like treat yourself. Like I love ice cream. So treating yourself to ice cream or something after having a discussion. And it's important also to schedule these discussions. Like you don't have to necessarily make a full-fledged calendar invite or something like that, but to have them regularly enough that you don't forget to have them. Because again, if we're not tracking how we're working towards our goals, how are we going to expect to accomplish them? And then don't be afraid, as I mentioned with the goals, is to modify, to make modifications to your goals, make modifications if your life situation changes, if you want to go back to school, you got a new job, a promotion, any of that kind of stuff. It's important to change and update accordingly. So again, like I mentioned before, you can find me on Instagram. I have a TikTok as well. And I also have the Finance Diaries podcast. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat. I see there's something Q&A. Okay, that Q&A wasn't for me. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, I can answer them now. But this presentation is also going to be available for you if you have any questions about it as well. Okay, I guess there are no questions. That's all good. Okay, well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you so much.